or the single biggest problem that a measurement solution needs to solve for the marketer is to give them an interface that is action oriented, right? So you need not be bombarded with your MMM results, experimental results, and things like that. Essentially, what you need is a planner.
I'm Joie Roberts, and today we're tackling some of the biggest misconceptions in modern marketing measurement. I'm joined by Rajeev Nair, co-founder and chief product officer at Lifesight, to unpack the questions marketing leaders and finance teams are actually asking behind closed doors. From unified measurement to incrementality, MMM, attribution, and experimentation, we're breaking down what truly drives decision-grade confidence. Rajeev, you ready to dive in?
Yes, Joy. Thank you for having me.
All right. This is one of my favorite questions I've been waiting to ask you. Why does marketing measurement need to be unified rather than relying on separate models and tools?
So honestly, the way I think about this is that this unified analytics, right? So when we say measurements, we are applying this to the marketing context. But if you think of unified analytics, this is not a very novel concept, right? So in any business function, you have certain decisions that need to be made on a day-to-day basis. These are fast decisions, but there's certain decisions that needs to be thought through, right? They are strategic in nature. So the techniques that we apply to make our day-to-day decisions are different from the techniques that we need when we are making slightly long-term forecasts and things like that, right? So we need different tools to solve different types of problems. So if I am to just use an analogy, so if you look at financial markets, so there are broadly two ways in which financial markets are analyzed, right? There's something called as technical analysis. So you have traders or intraday investors, right, who's looking at how is the market moving today, tomorrow, this week, and they want to get a directionally valid read on the market, and they make short-term bets. So this is called technical analysis. And then you have fundamental analysis, which is people who are value investors, right? They invest for the long term. They want to understand the true value of the companies, what the economy is like, how is it going to grow over the coming months and things like that, right? So you've got different levels of decisions that you need to make in that particular context. It's not very different when it comes to marketing. So when you need to decide whether to invest in a certain creatives over the other creatives, how to set your target CPAs and ROAS when it comes to your auctioning in ad platforms and things like that. These are very fast decisions. So you cannot wait for your model refresh or for your incrementality results to come in to make these decisions. So you need different techniques sort of empower you to make different decisions. That's why we have these different techniques. And what unified measurements does is it brings everything into one sort of orchestrate in an orchestrated fashion to one single unified offering. And a few years back, I think Google published a white paper where they sort of spoke about triangulation, those unified measurements for the first time. So that sort of gave companies like Lifesight a way to sort of roll up our offering to what we today call as triangulation, right? But otherwise, we have been around for 9 years now, and all these 9 years we were running fast attribution with lift studies, right? It's not something new. Now that it's a new category of product for sure, but this concept exists in every business function, right? And it exists in marketing. Now what we have done is we have sort of brought in all your fast systems of measurements and slow systems of measurement together in one platform, right? That's perhaps novel, but otherwise these techniques have existed for quite some time.
And bringing it into the unified platform that you're talking about really does help improve decision confidence, because now you don't really have multiple measurement methods, right? And people would get kind of a decision paralysis from that.
Yeah. So I think this is a fair criticism on unified offering, because so for a marketer, you have got a lot of things to worry about on a day-to-day basis. And besides that, now you have these measurement stack, right, which is throwing different numbers at you, right? So in a way, it's an overhead, how to make sense of all of these different things, right? But the way we look at it from Lifesight's perspective is the single problem or the single biggest problem that a measurement solution needs to solve for the marketer is to give them an interface that is action oriented, right? So you need not be bombarded with your MMM results, experimental results, and things like that. Essentially, what you need is a planner, right? And the way in which we have built our tool is the core of the tool is this planner, right? Where the marketers could come in simulate various future-looking scenarios. Right, what would happen if I change my budget and in these tactics? What would happen if I stop these campaigns? Should these creatives be refreshed, be stopped? Should I change my auction strategy? So you could simulate by asking these questions to the planner. Underneath it, of course, you have this triangulated measurement systems that is sort of helping your planner to come up with the right answer. But to solving for this decision paralysis or this analysis paralysis is perhaps the single most important offering that has to come from any measurement vendor. So when it comes to Lifesight for a marketer, of course, we do have all these models that is running in the background. We are designing experiments and deploying it on your behalf. But at the end of it, you are primarily focusing on the plans, right, which is primarily informed based on your business objectives. And once you have the plans would generate certain recommendations for you. And then you could also act on these recommendations right from the platform, right from Lifesight. You could change your bid settings in your ad platform. You could change your media mix in your ad platforms. And you could also generate presentation decks from Lifesight directly and could send it to other stakeholders, guide them in making other major business interventions. So solving for analysis paralysis is the central problem of a measurement system today. So if you look at all these measurement systems as silo techniques, of course, it could get a little overwhelming, but at the end of it, there has to be a very neat layer of abstraction on top of all of this, helps the marketer or enable the marketer to do his day-to-day work better.
Yeah, one source of truth too, because you're talking about siloed platforms that are taking credit from last touch attribution and MTA because that's what their job is. Is they're a marketing platform. They want you to spend more money with them. So you need one single source of truth. So you touched a bit on testing. So incrementality testing is considered kind of the gold standard, right, for proving impact. Then do brands still need the marketing mix modeling or even the attribution models?
This is a very interesting question. Incrementality testing is also called as the experiments. So experiments has the most scientific rigor, right? So you spend a lot of time in designing a good experiment. You make sure it is deployed properly. You control for a bunch of different factors so that you make sure that this experiment is successful, and then you have got some reads from this experiment, and then once you have those inference, you try to generalize this, right? So that's the standard approach in which we go about doing any test. But the truth when it comes to marketing context is we are not running marketing experiments in a laboratory setting, right? It happens in the real world. So you cannot control for everything, right? There are a lot of things that's outside of your controls. Besides this, you have to, it's a very slow system, right? Going back to what we were talking about, to run a good test, you need to wait for 3 to 5 weeks. If it's a bottom of the funnel tactic that you're testing, it takes 3 to 5 weeks to get a good read of your test. If it's top of the funnel, it could take even longer. So you're waiting for a very long period in time to have some learning from an experiment, which is a great thing. So if there are certain tactics, which is very important for your business objective, of course, it should run through a round of testing, but it's also not practical for you to test everything. On any given day, there are say a couple of dozens of levers that you have. Some of them are bigger ones, some of them are smaller ones. So you can't be testing everything, right? Though testing is, and even based on our interaction with customers, and also there were certain public survey results that were out. Testing results are sort of trusted more by the marketers compared to other measurement techniques. But it's not practical for the marketer to be testing everything. So that's why we need a framework where your periodic tests could be brought into other measurement systems so that you could course correct or guide your other measurement system for better accuracy. So that system in certain ways is more practical. So that's point number one. And point number two, as I was saying, the experiments that we run in the marketing context does not demand the kind of respect that you gave to scientific experiments, because you don't control for everything, right? And most importantly, whatever you learn, right? So for example, you run a test for Meta, you learn that it is giving good lift for your business, but that learning is still seasonal. Continue to trust that particular inference for a longer period in time. After a couple of quarters, you need to retest Meta, right? So you can only generalize that result for some period, right? Unlike your scientific experiment. So if you learn the chemical reaction or how a drug works, you can continue using that drug for a very long period of time. That does not happen in marketing cases, right? So experiments should be used only wherever necessary. And it's also very important to be smart about what you test, right? Because you spend a lot of energy in that whole process. So it's very important that you have a good hypothesis generator, and we believe MMMs could be a tool which generates a right set of hypotheses, which could then go to the incrementality testing process. So even generating the hypothesis needs some smarts, and you could perhaps make sure that you run a couple of tests every quarter. So what unified measurement offer is a way for you to bring that test result so as to improve the overall accuracy of your entire measurement stack.
That makes sense. So why would brands want to work with experiment testing vendor instead of just doing these experiments internally, like you were saying, like every 3 to 4 months?
Yeah. So one reason is exactly like what I said, right? You can't always be testing. So you at any given point in time you are running one test. Every quarter you are running 2 to 3 tests, right? So it's very important that you design these tests in the most rigorous way possible. So there are a bunch of benefits that you get if you sort of approach someone like Lifesight. So one thing is, so there are a lot of open source libraries that help you design these tests, but these libraries does not offer some prerequisite, I would say, techniques that is needed to make sure that these tests are really designed well. So if I'm to pick a few examples, it's very important that once you design your experiment, you should run some placebo tests to make sure that your treatment and control groups are truly randomized. And there are certain other sort of mathematical or statistical problems like you could find. So if you have to talk about geo experiments, right? In geo experiments, you're trying to find two groups of markets which are very similar, and then you treat one group of market with something like a scale up for meta, and then you see how they now diverge from one another, right? And that's your lift. But it's very important that when you select these markets, they are actually truly similar, right? You should not pick markets which just show some spurious similarity. We call this overfitting problem. So there are, for every way in which you could design a good test, there are thousands of ways in which you could create bad tests. And the problem with tests is there's a lot of opportunity costs involved, right? You're waiting for weeks before you have some learning. And at the end of it, if the test has failed, or even worse, if you have learned the wrong thing from the test, the cost of that is going to be even higher, right? So it's very important to go through a very scientific process. That's point number one. And companies like Lifesight. So last year, we have done about 1,052 incrementality studies, right, for about 500 distinct brands. So we have got that meta-analysis data available with us. So we have got a generalized process through which we could parse your data and we could recover test designs with, I would say, more certainty that the chances of concluding those tests are very high if you run through a more systematic process like what we follow at Lifesight. And another important factor is the data infra, right? If you are to run one-off experiments, it's okay that you could collect your data, you could perhaps design, you could perhaps invest a lot of your time and perhaps wipe code a experiment, whatever platform, design the test and deploy that and all of that. But eventually you need a data infra which sort of seamlessly moves the data in for experiment design, for experiment monitoring. And as part of experiment monitoring, we do something called as a monitoring for control, right? Which means, say, if you're scaling up meta or you're testing meta by scaling it up in a few markets, it's very important that everything else has to remain BAU, but which is not practical, right? The rest of things also will fluctuate a little, but it's very important that we monitor for all the other variables that they still stay within certain range, that your test is not contaminated, right? So there needs to be a major infrastructure play underneath it if you want to build an experiment culture, so that this whole process of running repeated tests, a few tests every quarter, tests that are informed by true business need. So to sort of orchestrate that process, you need infra also, right? So it's not limited to just having a library that could design a test for you. So it is these problems that we truly address, and not just designing a test and deploying that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like how you said it's like a whole testing culture. So it's not about one test, it's about testing throughout everything. And does that include creative level impact, or is it just limited to like higher level channels?
Yeah, we could. So most of the tests has to run for a few weeks, right? So if you want to test, if you want to do creative level A/B test, then a geo level experiment is not perhaps the best way to approach A/B test, creative level A/B test. But if you want to test broader creative strategies or broader creative messages, of course, you could run certain creative strategy for a few weeks in a selected set of geographies and compare it against a slightly different creative approach in another set of geographies, right? So you could do granular tests, but these tests has to run for a slightly longer period, right? If you want to make a decision over 1 week, over a few days, then testing is not, at least the testing the way that Lifesight offers is not the right way. So those kind of tests you could do perhaps in the platform itself. You could do A/B tests or lift studies as offered by Meta, because those are still user level tests, and you could conclude shorter tests there. But if you want the most strategic test, it could be for any intervention, could be targeting interventions, creative interventions, budget interventions, bidding level changes. You could do all of that in Lifesight or using the Geo experiment framework. But this test has to run for a little longer, right? You should have at least 3 weeks to 4 weeks time period to sort of conclude these tests with good stats, with good confidence.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So really, you can test pretty much almost everything, and you can do it with Lifesight, and you can A/B test on the platforms themselves. And we're talking a bit about MMM, and you brought up a little bit ago the open source libraries that are available today. So let's talk about the difference with kind of doing it yourself and then choosing Lifesight or somebody else for the MMM partner. And then let's also kind of layer in a little bit of misconception in there about the open source libraries.
Yeah. So most of the MMM open source libraries, what they do is they give you a way in which you could apply regression models on top of your data. And besides that, it helps you with certain data transformations like ad stock modeling, saturation modeling. It helps you do some hyperparameter optimization. And some of these libraries also give you a very basic planning tool, right? So most of them helps you with some basic regression solutions, which could guide you with solving some inference problems. But finally, for a market mix model to be useful for the business, it has to solve, or it has to address for certain real world complexities that is not solved by any of these libraries. To give a few examples, so when you have, say, a few marketing channels, like let's say TV, Meta, Google, TikTok, right? You've got a few marketing channels. So in most of the cases, they are not independently driving your outcome. They are also influencing one another, right? A person who is exposed to a TV ad might do a Google branded search, right? So your Google spend is driven by TV ad. Cause and effect that is driving your variables in itself, right? They're not just driving your revenue, but your Google spend is driven by your TV spend. Now, because of your TV ad, someone visits your website. Now they get retargeted in Facebook, right? So your Facebook retargeting spend is also driven by your TV, right? So these interactions or the cause and effect that exist between your marketing activities, these are very hard to model in any of these open source libraries. So this is point number one. Point number two is, for you to make any use of these models, you need some predictive capabilities. You want to do something about, or you want to make some decisions for next month, for next quarter, right? It has to be a future looking process. So the way in which most of these libraries deal with market mix modeling, it is not actually suitable for forecasting, right? Because forecasting is fundamentally a different problem than inference, right? So you have inference and you have prediction. So forecasting is a different class of statistical problems. So none of these libraries are built to solve for forecasting. They could help you understand what is the incrementality based on historical data, but that's it, right? And there also they'll overlook some of the complexities that I've been discussing. And besides that, there are a lot of statistical nuances around how do we set the right set of priors, how do we see if the model converts. So there are a lot of those nuances which is very hard to solve. So the benefit when it comes to going with a vendor is that we have mastered a process where we can create models across any data set, right? So we have this whole process around, can we recover the coefficients just based on observational data, right? And that's something that we have mastered over a few years by having built models on a lot of customers. So it is that framework that we are going to apply on your data. So the chances of us recovering the true coefficients is higher because we have done this many times in the past. And besides that, creating the model, right? So understanding the complexities between your variables, creating the model, using that to predict your future, everything is just one part of the process, right? Once you have a model, you need to monitor it forever. There could be a point where the model drifts and it is not good enough for your business. So before you make decisions based on a drifted model, you should know that the model is not good enough for you, that it needs calibration, it needs retraining, right? And this whole infrastructure that powers all of this model refresh, model calibration, that also needs some work, right? So none of these things are solved by your libraries. So I'm super happy that there are a lot of these libraries available. And we also encourage marketers to get their hands dirty with these libraries, because for one thing, they would know what building an MMM model would look like. And most importantly, if they run their data on these libraries and they see the result, I think then they'll start respecting the actual MMM vendors. Because once you then run the model through a proper MMM vendor, you would see how it is different from what you get of these libraries off the shelf, right? So I think this would, for a lot of brands who just want to get into this MMM world, having access to these open source libraries, I think would sort of remove that friction to entry for most of them. And once they see what these libraries are capable of, and once they know what these libraries are not capable of, then I think they would look out for these solutions. And it is those very deep and very specific gaps that we're filling in terms of building models that can really drive growth for the businesses.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, and I've been a marketer for many, many years, is this is the big difference of how brands become enterprise level brands, because of this level of sophistication, the calibration, the reiterations, and the testing, and having the partner who knows how to do this, who knows how to build the model specific to the brand. And I really like how you just explained all of that. And it's very technical, but it really comes down to, this is why CMOs and CFOs care, is because of all the outputs, and brings it back to the planner. You're always improving the forecasting and the planning also at Lifesight. And I know that's one of the features that's being improved right now. What are some other upcoming features at Lifesight that you are particularly excited about?
Yeah, so there are a few things that I'm personally super excited about. So one thing which has been in beta for almost a quarter now is our AI agents. So we call this MIA, Marketing Intelligence Agents. So as I was explaining, so we are super focused on building this actioning layer on top of the measurement stack. The actual value comes from the plans that you could create, the budget changes that you could orchestrate seamlessly from your measurement system, and all of that. Now, having an LLM-powered agentic layer on top of the measurement stack, I think would truly make the incrementality insights and the marketing analytics that we generate more accessible to the marketers, right? So we are creating that chat interface through which you could just ask an agent to create a plan for you, to ask what would be the demand like over the next quarter, to recommend the right strategy for your ad platforms. All of these things, though it's already in the platform, with agents getting access to this, and by giving natural language-based interfaces to the marketers, all the marketers could have consumed these insights in a more seamless way. So that is one big thing that's happening. So we think this feature would be generally available over the next couple of months. So that's one thing. Second, we are adding many advanced features to our planners, right? Which lets marketers to make hierarchical decisions, right? So for example, if you have many products and if you are a part of many geographies, there are certain products which are very strong. It has got a lot of brand recall or product recall. There are certain geographies where you have good presence. So we could generate insights where we could let the marketer know that for the brands and geographies where you have good baseline, you could afford to cut your spend and move it to other places which needs more marketing support, right? We call this hierarchical planning. So instead of just saying that you should increase Facebook here, decrease Google there, and things like that, we could also tell you that the current budget split across geography is not optimum, that this is how you should change the media mix across geography, across your product catalog, and things like that. So that's another feature which we are currently testing with a few customers, and we think that over the next few weeks this will reach production. Besides that, we have made a lot of progress when it comes to creative intelligence. So creative measurement is still it falls into that fast measurement category, right? You need attribution signals, customer level clicks on creatives to really know which creative is working for you. So it's very hard to model at creative levels, right? The way we model at channel and tactic and even campaign levels. But what we are trying to do is we are trying to look at creative quality metrics, and we are trying to understand the interaction of creative quality with the incremental revenue, for example, right? So by looking at how your creative quality is evolving over a period of time and how it correlates with the way in which your channel incrementality is changing, we could generate a lot of signals around whether your creatives are amplifying your channel, whether it is cannibalizing your channel, should you stop your creatives, should you refresh your creatives, and things like that. So this is where you could take your MMM insights to very granular level. So that's a thing that I'm personally super excited about. And then another very important thing, which is already showing a lot of good results, is a bid optimization, right? So to let the marketer know that the current bid setting, which decides how they go about participating in ad platform auctions, should they be conservative about it or should they be aggressive? So they could make those decisions based on the marginal returns that is expected of the channels. So very soon we will generate bid recommendations on a day-to-day basis, giving marketers better signals on how to participate in the ad platform auctions, right? So these are a few things that it's a longer list, but these are a few things which I think is going to be massive over the coming months.
Very exciting. AI agents, the creative testing, I think that applies to every single brand. Everybody wants that. So really cool, and love the planner, and always creating and making things bigger and better at Lifesight.
Yep.
Well, Rajeev, if there's one thing that you would like marketers to take away about marketing measurement for Q2, kind of the rest of 2026, what would it be?
Yeah, so a lot of things are changing in the ecosystem at large, right? So we see the search traffic switching from search engines to AI interfaces. That's one thing. So similarly, there are a lot of macro level changes. So couple of things that the marketers should align with is to always think about incrementality first. Because for every dollar that you put into the business, it needs to prove its worth back to you. And an incrementality based system is the only way in which you could accomplish that. And the second one is to build a culture of experimentation and a mindset of experimentation. So a lot of marketers still think that experiment is a waste of money, that you spend a lot of time and all of that, but it's the only way in which you can learn with confidence, right? So we are not we're not asking to just go about testing everything, but it's very important to have that open mindset and to approach everything. So everything that you do has to go through a testing framework, right? Not every testing framework has to be super rigorous, but you should always be testing. So incrementality and experiment. So these two things has to be imbibed and internalized by every marketer, given how the environment at large is evolving.
Yes, the culture of experimentation and, of course, incrementality first. Rajeev, this has been such an honor to get all of this insight from you. Really appreciate you joining us today. And until next time.
Yeah, thank you, Joie. Thank you for taking time out and making this happen.